sort of linguistically described arc or scythe shape as to where the flu really takes off. But there's other issues there. This is the language that's showing up around it. So we may be running into the first of what we call the refuseniks. And that is to say that the governments are going to be running into a wall of people that absolutely refuse to have anything to do with this vaccine.
Absolutely.
At any level of risk from, supposed government retribution. Now, we know that our government anyway, is preparing for this because a recent conference on the swine flu in Washington, D.C. included topics such as what to do when the populace doesn't follow government orders.
Right.
So they're preparing. They're going to be the government's going to be rather shocked, I think, about the level of vehemence and refusal and the expression of it throughout a very large percentage of the population that they had not anticipated. I think they're really only figuring to get resistance from maybe 10 to 12 to 15% of the populace, and it may scale way up into the 50s or 60s or higher. It may be that there's only a small percentage of people willing to be sacrificial and actually take the vaccines. That's not to say that governments such as Greece, with their announced policy of no exceptions, everybody's going to get it, won't in fact try and do that. It's just to say here in the U.S., the refuseniks movement builds and eventually goes to form a core around which if you will, a modern revolutionary or reform movement comes out.
Oh, can you talk about that a little bit? Because, all of us, we are just, we're trying to decide. Do we head for the hills? Do we carry our guns with us at all times? Do we shoot the guys with the needles that are coming after us?
But see, I don't see that happening. All that is fear language.
Okay.
You have to acknowledge whenever we get this kind of stuff, because I'm a trained analyst and a programmer and a software guy, I like to validate. And because I'm an Aikidoist, a martial artist, in Aikido what we do is we test constantly.
Okay.
And so you test yourself in, being able to project this energy or do that move and so on. And so I test our data sets against the developing reality. And so we see all the fear language out there that says, flee, they're going to shoot you in the back if you turn and run from the guy with a needle. Mm-hmm. Well, that's kind of bogus. That is not going to happen here in the U.S. or probably anywhere else. The reason it's not going to happen here in the U.S. is because of the sheer personnel that would be required. So imagine the situation that you wanted to give forced vaccinations across the U.S. Well, if you're going to do that, you couldn't do it slowly from a government viewpoint. Why? Well, because the slower it is, the more resistance that would be allowed. And if there was something really nasty in the vaccine, you wouldn't want people dropping dead from it before you got everybody inoculated, right? Mm-hmm. So from their viewpoint, if they were going to do forced vaccinations, they'd have to do it in a rush, in a hurry. And yes, there's a couple of points of entry, like school kids and so on. However, that's a separate issue we need to talk about. But just imagine what they would need to do something in a hurry. A, they would have to have enough doses to do the whole population or close. B, they would have to have it distributed evenly throughout the country to those points of centers where they would need to be able to, or have to get at it in order to be able to inoculate, which pretty much brings it down to virtually all the healthcare areas. Say that you just decided you were going to do it out of the your local county communicable disease subset. Well, you'd have to get to every single county in the U.S. You'd have to have the census tell you how many people were in that county, and then you'd have to have the appropriate level of vaccine there in order to start this and do it in a short period of time. Now, the reason I'm going through the detail here is because it gets real important real quick. Even if you were able to accomplish that, which is to drive all these trucks with all the vaccine and get it all distributed, and you had a mechanism and it all worked, then you're going to need people to enforce the vaccine being given on everyone else. And basically, in our country, our calculations say that in order for that to occur, you would actually really need 1 out of 5 people to be an enforcer on the other 4. And so if we had a compliant population and you had 1/5 of the population just all volunteer to be enforcers on the other 4, then they're still going to have to get trained on what they have to do. They're still going to have to be motivated, put into a position to where they're going to be there, etc. And besides which, in 300 million people, you're looking at the having to motivate and move 50 or 60 million people as enforcers, and then the logistics support for them, which involves several other million people. And so the manpower does not exist for the idea.
It does exist. I was just listening to Frankly Speaking, and they are hiring somewhere up in Michigan or whatever. They are hiring the unemployed to be guards at the FEMA detention camps. They're advertising for it. We've got this massive amount of unemployed. Do you think an unemployed person wouldn't work for $100 a day, rounding up all of the people that haven't gotten their shots?
Sure, I'm sure they would not do that. I mean, you'd find some cases, but what are you going to do? Are you going to give all these unemployed people guns and then tell them to go out and round up these fellows? It isn't going to work. I mean, you're assuming that the unemployed would be able to be folded into a military fashion. Look at the trouble that we had in World War II, getting all those goons.
What about the Acorn people? They are already training in a military fashion. I've seen the video.
But how many Acorn people are there? Are there 60 million of them? No. Acorn people are, I'm sorry?
We would have to have 60 million. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying. In order to have this be effective and be able to do it in a short period of time, you would need 60 million people involved in the delivery and the enforcement of the delivery. And we don't have that large of a structure within our nation. China would find it difficult with their 500 million people in basically their armed forces. Mm-hmm. I mean, they would have a hard time. Our government is going to have a hard time doing this under any level of coercion. And you notice that usually the coercion that is being offered is, take this vaccine or we'll shoot you. No, they're not saying that. They're saying, take this vaccine or you can't get your driver's license renewed.
No, take this vaccine or we throw you off welfare. That's what's being said. And it'll probably...
but no one's ever actually received any notice of that. This is still a rumor at this stage. There's been no enforcement. The only thing we have is a WHO directive that allows our national health care system to be put under the auspices of the UN in the case of a pandemic. But it doesn't give them any enforcement. All it gives them is fear language. And we have to be really careful about this. So the repeating of the rumors that, yes, they're hiring for FEMA camp guards. Okay, big deal. There's 300 million people in this country. They can't build camps to put enough people in there to make a difference. You cannot hire enough guards. Our military is crumbling. Our dollar is going to collapse. They're not going to be able to pay these people, and it just goes on and on and on. So you've got to be real careful about the repetition of some of the fear language here. Yes, there's a whole lot of it out there saying, this will happen to you if you don't take the vaccine. But so far there's no evidence anywhere that any of it's actually being implemented that way. And I'm presuming that our data is correct and that the way we've seen things in the past will also work out. And that is to say that none of these rumors will ever actually prove to be true. Instead, though, there may indeed be other more nefarious kind of things going on. And in fact, the powers that be won't use guns. They'll try and do it with sweets as opposed to sour. And the first thing they're going to try and do is get at it through the kids. And unfortunately for them, that's actually going to stir up the biggest point of resistance. I think the refuseniks will arise as a result of people saying, my kid isn't going to get that concoction.
Mm-hmm. Well, fortunately, there are enough awake mothers and fathers out there these days because of the autism.
Correct.
Because of the human papilloma virus and the damage it has done to children.
Well, also because of the education on the Internet.
Yes.
So the rumors, to a certain extent, by promulgating the fear language, do cause at least some people to become motivated through fear to do research. But like I say, we need to be real careful about the repetition of what we assume to be true, because much of it is probably not. Yeah, I've seen the descriptions on Monster and some of the other places for the National Guard hiring internment and relocation people. But in order to do anything effectively with 300 million people, you're going to need a huge force, and they don't have the money to hire a huge force. Our government is currently in the process of coagulating and dying anyway, regardless of what they may say. And so even their best effort, even if they announced tomorrow we're going to hire 15 million people as internment camps, and you can come on in and get to beat all of your neighbors with sticks and herd them around in a camp and abuse them the way that we used to do as Nazis, you're not going to get that many people, because by the time they started that whole thing and getting it organized, our dollar is just going to be wiped out, and they're in a world of hurt with the rest of us.
Oh, boy. Wonderful.
Well, sort of. I mean, it's kind of a good thing, right? Fascism depends on a steady stream of dollars from a corporate sponsor, basically. And as the dollars die, so will corporate structures in a huge way.
And maybe we will all be free again, is what you're saying. You are listening to Radio RMN, and I'm talking with Cliff High from the WEBBOT project, and he was just about to say something positive. I can't believe it. But